Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Steph's Own channel. If you're joining me here for the first time, I am so excited to have you. Now, those of you who have been around for a while know this already, but I'm a sewist who loves her prints. I'm always drawn to bold patterns. The bigger and the louder, the better. People might talk about capsule wardrobes or bang on about their minimalist work uniform, but I've never had a problem fitting bold pieces into my everyday closet. And judging by the response whenever I share these makes with you, I think it's safe to say that this group loves a bold print too. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I have some loud, beautiful fabrics in my stash that I'm determined to finally sew with this spring and summer. As I plan what to make, I thought it'd be fun to kind of bring you along for it and have a little bit of a chat about how I approach sewing with larger scale prints and patterns. First, I'll talk about some of my best tips about matching prints with garment designs, and then we'll dive into my fabric stash to talk about some more concrete plans. As we go through, please feel free to comment on my pattern ideas and share alternatives. I'm always grateful for your recommendations. Sound like a fair deal? Good. Let's get into it. Let's be honest, prints are kind of a double-edged sword. They get all the love and attention in fabric stores and on Instagram, but whenever I see a fabric destash sale happening, prints are often the thing people are trying to get rid of. Clearly, a lot of us fall in love with bold designs, but then struggle to turn them into garments we actually want to wear. The good news is that with a bit of strategy, this becomes a lot easier. Next time you find yourself wondering, what could I make with that? You can run through a few simple questions to guide your thinking. It might feel complicated, but breaking it down always helps. As a quick caveat on terminology, I'm going to keep saying print, but I'm also including jacquards, checks, and other kind of woven patterns into that bucket. When I use pattern in this video, I'm referring to the actual garment design. First, we have to think about matching our print scale to our pattern. In the simplest way, large motifs typically work better in large, uninterrupted spaces. When you have a big print with defined motifs bigger than a few inches or any kind of border or panel scene, these fabrics are going to look better on simple garments where the print can breathe. Think maxi dresses, caftans, wrap skirts, or wide leg pants. You're keeping it simple so you can see that motif in full. In contrast, smaller or medium scale prints can handle garments with smaller pieces and more shaping. A ditzy floral or polka dot can easily pair with a fitted blouse or a dress with a lot of seams. Let's take the smaller of these two black florals as an example. As a little puff sleeve top with an open neckline, it would look great, but if I made the smaller floral into a big caftan, I suspect the print would turn into visual static. Next, I have to think about how clear the design is and how that fits with the garment's overall structure. If a print is very, say, crisp and high contrast, then I know that often does require a simple pattern shape. This is particularly true for any prints involving something very recognizable, like a human face. Lots of seams and style lines are going to chop up these clear motifs in a way that looks awkward or distracting. Sometimes this can be avoided with careful pattern matching, but depending on the print, this could be really painful or an even impossible road to go down. On the flip side, if a design is more abstract or painterly, it's way more forgiving. These types of prints can handle more pleats, darts, curved seams without looking broken or messy. So let's say that I wanted to make something fairly structured for summer, say a fitted dress with some princess seams. If I wanted to use a print fabric for that, I might go with something like this linen. This, you can see, it's a very painterly floral, it's a soft design. There'd be no need to pattern match. This print wouldn't distort in any way around the seams of the garment, but I would just be making that trade-off that those structural seams would be a lot less visible in a print this dense. Our third consideration here is technical feasibility. Basically, how practical will it be to sew this print into the design that I have in mind? Print directionality plays a huge role here. If a fabric has a very clear top and bottom or really strong elements like stripes, I need to be really intentional with how I cut my pattern pieces to keep everything aligned. Certain patterns like bias cut or circle skirts just don't really always play nicely with directional prints because parts of the design are always going to end up rotated or distorted. Panel prints and border prints, again, add another layer of challenge because you need to be really careful with where major design elements are going to fall across the garment. I actually find this process to be really fun, but it definitely isn't the right match for every project and every level of patience. As someone who occasionally suffers from, shall we say, occasional lapses in patience, I have made big mistakes with pattern placement in the past. I've mentioned them on the channel before, but this once involved having a really obvious pair of red moons centered on the bum of a skirt, and once I even accidentally created like a weird jellyfish uterus on a pair of leggings. If you don't have the patience to avoid this sort of outcome, don't pick prints which require this much consideration. We do have one final variable to think through though, and it's one that only you can answer for yourself. I'm speaking, of course, about wearability. Basically, are you going to end up feeling comfortable and confident in the resulting garment if it turns out how you expect? Critically, are you actually going to wear it regularly? You might be thinking like, well, duh, Steph, of course I have to sew garments that I want to wear, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. It takes practice to learn to distinguish between I like this print and I want to wear this print. If you're struggling, you can always compare a print to garments that you already know that you love. For example, I love the silk painting print which Stitch Fabrics has in stock occasionally. Whenever I buy them, they get made up quickly and I wear the resulting garments to death. This gives me confidence that if I want to buy more of it, they'll end up being used. You also need to think about versatility. Sometimes you might want that statement blouse, but if most of your sewing is for the office, certain prints just might not be appropriate for you. If your intention is to make everyday pieces as opposed to costumes or art pieces, always consider how your latest project might fit into your existing wardrobe. Make sure you can imagine wearing it for the activities you regularly do. So that's my checklist: print scale, design clarity, technical feasibility, and wearability. Now that we've covered our framework, let's dive into my fabric stash and take a look at some of the wildest prints I plan to use this spring. Alrighty, we have a nice little stack going here. I'm very excited to talk to you about all of these. First up, we have this really fun printed stripe on, this is like a cotton poplin or cotton lawn. I purchased this one from Hey Sew Sister. She's based up in Edinburgh, and she has a really great selection of screen prints and block print cottons from India at the moment. This fabric features a mustard stripe, but of course the real fun comes from these large-scale cherries that are scattered across the fabric. So when we look at this print, there are a few things we can pick out immediately which impact our end pattern choice. Firstly, let's talk scale. The cherries are pretty big. However, the cherry placement is also fairly sparse in the sense that there's big spaces of stripes between them. For both of these reasons, we don't want a pattern featuring lots of small pieces which will further break up and make the print unbalanced. In the name of keeping it simple, I was just thinking about an oversized shirt for this. Initially, I had planned on using the Olia shirt from Paper Theory. That one has a really unique shoulder and yoke construction. I think it would let a striped fabric shine. However, I just don't love the way that the cherries actually look when they're running horizontally, so I'm going to go for the Closet Core Jenna instead. This is another oversized drop shoulder shirt. It still gives me some room for playing with the stripe direction, but it's not such a key feature of the garment. Next up, we have one of my treasured designer-inspired fabrics. This snap pea fabric is so springy and I'm desperate to use it. I've had it for like 2 years being afraid to cut into it. This is a viscose twill. It's white, slightly sheer, but not really. And I purchased it from I think it's from the Meter Club. I will check, but I think it's from the Meter Club. Anyway, as I said, this fabric features these large-scale snap pea pods, which are about 7 inches tall. We have even more challenges with these snap peas than we do with our cherry print. Firstly, these peas are effectively very wide horizontal stripes, so I need to minimize horizontal seams to avoid breaking them up. This is also a very visible, very recognizable motif, and they're going to stop being recognizable quickly. Finally, wearability is a huge factor with this print. I love the design, but I know that it's very playful. I think that I would wear it as like a simple summer dress or a short sleeve top, but I would find it a bit too twee for something like a wrap blouse with big sleeves for work. So we have a lot we need to do. We need to minimize seams, we need to keep these peas facing the right way, and we need to manage this lightweight, very drapey fabric. Ideally, I also avoid ending up looking like I'm a, villain on a children's cartoon show. Now, I have 2 ideas for this. I could just stick with the original Dolce & Gabbana inspiration and do a dress. They had a few variations on the snap pea design, but they all involve simple shapes with some gathering or shearing. If I were going down this road, I'd probably, again, just do a simple summer dress with a sheared top and a ruffle. I've made dresses like this before, they're really quick, just rectangles, and they're a standard uniform item for me in the summer. Alternatively, though, I could go for like a little flirty top. In a rare twist, I'm not going to recommend a vintage pattern here, and I actually have a new pattern. This is a newly released McCall's 8563. For my top, I was thinking about View B, which is the one with the gathered waist here. In a viscose, as opposed to I assume that this is a cotton that they've used in the product photo, I think it would have a much softer look, and I would absolutely not do the big collar just to reduce that twee factor. Even though this idea has more complexity than the shirred dress, we'd still be dealing with some solid, wide pattern pieces and, critically, minimal horizontal seaming. For our penultimate fabric, I wanted to show you a border print. Now, border prints can be a bit painful, and typically the easiest way, or the patterns that people recommend, are, picking boxy gathered styles, something with a straight hem to show off the border, especially if you have one of those really crisp, kind of geometric ones. However, this is a slightly more unusual border print. This is a medium weight, fairly crisp cotton featuring a soft watercolor of the Tuscan countryside. I actually bought this one in Florence. In terms of fabric features, we have a deep border on both selvage sides. The fact that it's a double border here is critical. If we want to avoid any part of the garment showing the countryside scene upside down, we have to be really careful with how we position these pattern pieces. The fact that this is such a soft, kind of painterly design really gives us much more freedom with how we use the border. We can have more vertical seams interrupt the border without worrying about that distortion and making a sort of geometric pattern match. So rather than show you those gathered skirts and wide leg trousers, let's consider something a bit slinkier. I am a big fan of True Bias's latest pattern, the Quinn Vest and Dress. This is a princess seam topper dress featuring a V neckline, back buckle, and center front opening. I think of it as a pretty 90s style, and True Bias does these sorts of leveled up basics really well, really consistently. I would want to make the short dress version of the Quinn, and I could have the countryside scene at the bottom and the blue with the birds on my upper body. However, I know I'd be cutting it close given the amount of blue I have between the two borders. If that plan didn't work, I would just go with the vest version and just do some real fussy cutting to ensure I captured all the best pieces of this print. I hope that the resulting dress still feels unique, but it's still simple and it's wearable for spring and summer. Last, but certainly not least, we have the final boss of my complicated fabric stash. I recently acquired this linen from Simply Fabrics. They're based in Brixton here in London, and it's honestly one of the most unique fabrics I've ever seen. This is a giant dahlia print, and it has a huge print scale. Each dahlia is like 2 feet tall. However, it is a soft design and quite a dense print, so you don't really see that flower motif unless you're taking in a fairly large section of the fabric. Now, normally for a fabric like this, I'd immediately be thinking like dress, caftan, basically get the biggest pattern pieces I possibly can. However, this fabric is definitely more on the medium weight side, I would say. There is some drape and linen gets softer with time, but I just don't think a big dress would be that comfortable in this. Similarly, a circle skirt would be heavy, and I have nowhere to wear that circle skirt. However, Daughter Judy just released a skirt pattern which I think can solve our problem here. The Henry skirt is a very unique wrap skirt without side seams, ties, or a zip. Basically, it's a tube, you step into it, and you're almost folding the front piece back onto itself. It's a very unusual design, but it's designed for mid-weight wovens, so the fabric and pattern pairing here could be perfect. However, I own no fitted skirts, and I suspect that the waist to hip grading on this one might be tricky, so it'll be one of the 2 toiles that I do this year. If you do have other ideas though of what I could do with this fabric, definitely let me know because I'm really, really keen to get this one right. It's the one I'm most excited about. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video and that it's inspired you to take another look at some of the lingering prints in your stash. Just remember, the tips that I shared today are meant as general guidelines, not hard rules. Sometimes going against the guideline, whether done intentionally or not, creates beautiful results. And honestly, part of the process here is just experimenting. It really takes time to figure out what kinds of garments you truly love to sew and to wear, so don't stress about a few misses along the way. I'll be back soon with another video, and for this, I'm thinking of doing something a bit different. I was thinking we could do a deep dive into plant-based fibers for summer, so our cottons, linens, ramie, tencels. We could talk about their best uses, fiber qualities, sustainability. Let me know if you'd be interested. If you do want to hear more from me, of course subscribe, but you can also always follow me over on Instagram. I'm at the same handle, just StephZone. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!